In this video, I'm going to show you how to sketch animals from a reference photo using a proportional divider, making it really easy and fast to get the sketch that you need. To start off with, I'm using a set of graphite pencils and have chosen the lightest lead hardness I have available, being a 2H pencil. And I'm going to be using Bristol Vellum drawing paper. All I'm going to do is take my proportional divider and use it to measure the distances between certain areas of my reference photo. There are multiple ways that you can use a proportional divider for sketching. By using the slider and pin it has to change the distances between the gaps on either side, and scale a drawing larger or smaller than the reference photo you are using to draw from. For this video though, I am showing you how to use it with just holding the measurements to transfer. If you do not have a proportional divider, you can use a ruler instead for this method of sketching. So what I want to start doing is measuring the outside edges and distances between the edges of my reference photo and where the animal is at in the photo as well, and then use those same measurements over on my drawing paper. Because for this drawing I am trying to draw an exactness to the reference photo that I have prepared for this drawing. So now I'm just going to take my proportional divider and gather all of the distances between this right side of the paper and how far some of the measurements are for the edges of the animal's ears and neck and whatnot. So if you don't start off by measuring the exterior measurements between the edges of your reference photo and the animal, you're going to make things a lot harder for yourself trying to figure out the distances between everything as you start building your sketch. So say you started in the middle around the eye of the animal, then you're going to have to measure a lot more points from that part on the inside of the animal than you would if you had started from the outside, because you're going to have to be double checking yourself a lot more doing that than you will starting from the outside. When you start from the outside and work your way in, then you are giving yourself the better proportions for the entire shape of the animal, and once you have those right, then it's easier to kind of judge the accurate distances for those other details of the animal on the inside of the shape. So once I have all of these points of reference marked on my drawing paper, I'm just doing lines to indicate those distances at this point. It's important to try and get each individual section for those distances because there's a lot of them as it changes for this rabbit. And once I have all of those in place, then I'm going to start adding in my sketch lines, or actually sketching in the shape of the animal in between where I've marked those proportional distances. So now it's up to me to actually eyeball what I'm doing and paying attention to the different curves and shapes of each one of these individual lines as it goes from one point of reference to the next point of reference for those measurements that I got earlier and put on the paper. Now doing this, you're going to make mistakes. You're not going to get all of the lines that you need to add between those points that you've marked. You're not going to get all of them accurate the first time around. You're going to have to do it a couple of times and then study that reference photo and try to get those curvatures as close to being accurate as possible so that you can end up having a very accurate sketch once you're finished. Because in terms of trying to draw realistic drawings, there is a lot that goes into trying and getting everything proportional with your sketch before you proceed with the drawing process later of filling in all of the other details for your drawing. If you start off with a well-proportioned sketch, you'll have just an easier time through your drawing process getting everything to line up the way it needs to be and making your drawing look realistic. So one thing to note that is really important with this drawing process too is to make sure that you get your reference photo really sized up to the parameters of your actual drawing. So not necessarily the paper size that you're using. In my case, I've taped off the edges, but this was just in case I decided to use my pencils for the background and create a background with my drawing, which I didn't end up doing. But I needed to make sure that I'm measuring to the point that I am cutting off anything with my drawing as well. So you have to measure very, very precisely with that reference photo and what you're putting onto your paper and the size of your paper. If you get anything wrong, those measurements just a little bit off, working on, like, say, the face of an animal can actually really throw things off when you don't get those proportions right. So always double check yourself, triple check yourself even with all of the initial lines that you're putting in to indicate all of the distances for the subject. And of course, once you start working in those lines, you're going to want to check yourself even more. It may take you a while to get your sketch right. In this case, for this particular sketch, it did take me about 45 minutes to do this entire sketch. Just don't worry about how much time it takes you to get the sketch done. Just focus on each little individual task that you need to do in order for it to reach completion, to where you feel like you've gotten all of those distances proportionally measured right, and the shapes of each of those exterior lines all proportionate to how they change and move between those initial measurement points. So now I have the exterior of the rabbit sketched in. I'm gonna go ahead and start sketching in the portions for the eyeball. And I'm starting off by getting the smallest measurement or the one with the least distance, I should say, which would be the top part of the eye and the top part of the head. So that way I can get my first initial measurement already in there pretty easy. And then from the exterior part of that head, I'm going to measure the distance between that and the lower section of the eyeball. Always going from a measurement that I know is accurate to begin with before I start measuring the distance between anything else from that particular point. Now that I've got all of those points of measurements in for the eyeball, now I'm going to start working in the curvature lines and making sure that those have a very close to accurate curve to what I'm seeing in the reference photo. So now what I'm doing is checking the distances of the neck of the rabbit, because I am looking at that reference photo and my drawing, and I'm noticing that the neck is a little bigger than it should be. So I do want to try and make sure I reanalyze those measurements there and make sure I get everything corrected to the way it needs to be. So with my sketches, I don't typically sketch in a whole lot of details into it because I don't feel like that's necessary. It would end up costing me more time in the whole drawing process long term if I were to sketch out details with just my initial sketch rather than doing those later with the drawing process. I usually just sketch in those major details, which would be the exterior lines and parameters of the animal, if you'd call it that, and the major details like the eyes or the chin and jaw lines, and then maybe some shoulder lines or just some really big obvious sections of clumping fur, and of course just those exterior lines of maybe the ears. I don't really spend a whole lot of time trying to draw in other details, for instance like the fur or the details around the face. I only focus on doing anything major, those really big obvious shapes. I have a real-time version of this sketching tutorial over on my Patreon where I take you through each and every step I do and give you loads of explanations for what I am doing. I'll have a link to that tutorial in the video description. Now, once you've got all of your sketch complete, you of course are going to want to double check everything once again. Use that proportional divider to check your distances from one area of your sketch to another and make any adjustments you need with yours. Once that's done, then you are ready to begin the drawing process for your drawing. The only question is, how do you draw fur? What sort of techniques do I need to learn so that I can draw realistic looking fur? I will show you how to draw key components of fur in the top right video here. And additionally, this rabbit is available as a real-time tutorial on my Patreon. Sign up for the $5 tier and gain instant access to the rabbit and many more tutorials in pencil, colored pencil, and soft pastel. A link to my Patreon is on the screen here as well as in the video description. Thanks so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.